I wanted to just share a couple of things with you about off-grid living. Caitlin's not here right now. He should be back soon. He went to do some carpentry work for a neighbor lady, and I know he'll have something to share on this video. I want to call this Off-Grid at Ground Zero, and what it's like actually just starting a homestead, and kind of share some things that we've learned and principles that we believe are important for starting right off the bat. I just harvested our, this is the cilantro that we had planted last year actually, and it's gone to seed, and so I'm harvesting the seeds. The seeds are actually called coriander. But I wanted to share some principles because I see a lot of discussion online about different aspects of starting up a homestead and what to look for, and there seems to be a lot of confusion about what's acceptable for a homestead and what isn't. And so I just wanted to share some experience. I've had opportunity to start up 4 actual homesteads in my lifetime. One I don't really remember, I was too young. But the second one I do remember, and the big thing I remember about that one with my parents was they had a bored well. Water is one of the most important things when you consider a homestead. Their property, the farm, and it's where they live now, did not have any water source on it naturally, and so they bored a well. It's the difference between a bored well and a drilled well is the bored well is the one that's great big around, and they're not very deep, and so they have a greater possibility for groundwater contamination and also for cave-in. That was the thing that I remember that kind of always scared me with my parents' well, was that it would cave in on the outside of the well casing, and it kind of scared me. But anyway, I think that a drilled well would be a better option. That's the one that's usually about that big, around 6 or 8 inches, and they're much deeper generally, and safer. I don't think they tend to cave in like bored wells do. But at any rate, when you're looking for a country property, always consider water as a primary importance. It's ideal to have a spring, or at least a creek, or ideally actually both. And God really blessed us with this farm because we drilled a well. There's a spring coming from across the road about 2 miles up in the hills, and it flows onto our property, and it has never dried up completely, but it does slow down a lot. But we have the benefit of that water, and then back in the back there's a couple of springs that actually begin on our property, but they're kind of far back, so it's a little bit difficult for us to access them. But we do have the benefit of the water flowing up here towards the house into the creek, which is behind the house. So God has blessed us with a lot of water on this land, and that's vital. But when I first moved to Kentucky, back in the early 2000s, I bought property with 2 friends of mine. All of us were women, and we were going to homestead together. And that was kind of tough because I was the youngest and the strongest of the 3 of us, and so a lot of the heavy work fell on me. We did find a spring down the hill from where we lived. We lived in a camper there for a while, and then we bought a mobile home. But we found the spring about 100 yards downhill from where we lived, and we would carry water uphill in 5-gallon buckets to water the garden, and that ruined my wrists. That was way more than a 5-gallon bucket of water weighs 40 pounds, and I'm not a big person, and carrying that uphill day after day was really more than I needed to do. So think ahead, you know. I mean, we only have so much strength and energy, and if we hurt ourselves, then you know we're really damaging what we can do in the future and the service that we can do for God. So what we did on that place, we couldn't afford county water, and even if we could, we had a hard time getting them to run down our section of the road because we were just I think there was one other house beyond us, and then you're in the next county. Well, we're kind of in the middle of no man's land because neither county wanted to run city water for us. Eventually they did. But what we did was we got these, you've seen these IBC totes that we have on our farm, and I'll try to show those before the video's over because I want to give Kalen a chance to give his little input on off-grid, starting up an off-grid homestead. But what we did there was we had 5-gallon buckets. We had built a barn. I'll tell you more about that in just a minute. But we got, not 5-gallon, 55-gallon bucket drums, and we would, we actually started off collecting water off of the roof of our, what do you call it? The tarp, the canopy that you roll up off of a porch. I can't think of the name of it right now. But anyway, we collected water off that. We'd let it rain for a few minutes to wash it, get all the bird poop and stuff off. And then we would collect it, and then we would boil it and put just a tad of bleach in it. And we would use that for washing our dishes and bathing and stuff like that. We bought our drinking water. And then when we built the barn, we would collect it off the barn. We'd let it rain for a little bit again. That's a lot of work too, but it was better than carrying water from the spring. If it rained at 2 o'clock in the morning and we needed water, we got up at 2 o'clock in the morning and set up the collection system. And to keep our water from freezing, we had other, I don't know, I think we had about 10 55-gallon drums inside the barn. And here in this part of Kentucky, they never froze solid inside the barn. But we would store, I think at one point we had about 500 gallons of water stored in there. That we never ran out of water. And you have to be very careful. You can take a good bath in 1 gallon of water, believe it or not, a good bucket bath. And if you don't know how to do that and you'd like me to maybe do a video on how to do that, then just let me know in the comments. At any rate, water is vital. So that's one of the ways that you can get water in an off-grid situation when you don't have a well yet, or you haven't been able to afford one, or you haven't been able to develop a spring that may be on your property, is you can collect off the roof. But I do recommend you let it rain for a few minutes first to kind of wash the roof a little bit, and then we actually strained it through like a t-shirt or something to get the big stuff out, and then we would boil it and strain it again. That's probably Kalen. Be right back. Yeah, that was Kalen. He'll be home in just a few minutes and he can give his input on this. The other thing that I wanted to, well, there's several things that I want to touch on. I don't want to get too long on the video, but I just wanted to share some stuff, is sanitation. What do you do if, like when we bought our property in the other county, it was me and the ladies, we bought the property and we had a camper and we pulled it on, and there we were. No hookups, no electricity, nothing. And so what we did, there's a biblical principle. It's found in Deuteronomy 23:13. It talks about if you have to relieve yourself, you have a paddle, and you go out and you dig a hole and you relieve yourself and bury it. So, you know, that was biblical septic system. I mean, it's the same principle with a septic system. You're burying what comes out of you, your waste, and so outhouses work, but you know, sometimes you don't have time to build an outhouse. And so what we did, ladies, whenever we moved on that place, was I dug trenches. You know, I just took a shovel and pickaxe and just dug trenches, and we had lumber covers because we were building a barn, which I will get to. And we took the lumber cover, which is kind of like a tarp. It's not as heavy duty as a tarp, but anyway, I strung that up around some trees for privacy and dug the trenches and then put a tarp over it so that if it was raining and we had to go to the bathroom, we wouldn't get rained on while we were out there. And that worked okay until winter came, and then it was pretty chilly. And so what we did was, a friend of ours had a backhoe, and I borrowed the backhoe and just dug a big pit. And we had buckets that we would, 5-gallon buckets, and we just took them in the house, and we would use the bucket in the house and then take the bucket out, dump it in the big pit, and then put dirt on it just to cover it. There was no odor. There was no problem with it. We could, you know, we had privacy. And that worked very well. You know, just keep your bucket clean and sanitized, let it get some sunlight. And they used to call those chamber pots, and 5-gallon bucket from Walmart works fine for that. In the wintertime, the dirt would freeze. And so we, you know, until it got really cold, we would actually just throw a tarp over the dirt pile next to the pit, and that would keep the dirt from freezing for a while. And then when it got really cold and the dirt would freeze deeper, and those of you who live up north, you're probably laughing at me, but it worked down here where we're at. You may have to do something different, and the Lord will help you to know what to do. But we actually just brought buckets of dirt, and we had them lining the hallway. We lived in a mobile home by then, and if we had to go out and empty our bucket, we had a bucket of dirt in one hand and our elimination bucket in the other hand. And my cat's playing with the stuff here. She's a good cat, by the way. She brings us gifts and leaves them on the front porch. I just don't like it when she leaves them in my rubber boots, which she has done twice. But at any rate, we would bring the buckets of dirt in the house, and that worked. That worked very well. And so that's just an idea of, you know, for year-round what you can do for sanitation. But again, the biblical principle, bury it. Don't just go out in the woods and dump your load and leave it. That's not, I just believe that God has principles in His Word for every aspect of our lives, and I believe it's for our good and for health. So that deals with that. Another aspect is gardening. There's a biblical principle in Proverbs 24:27 that shows that God intends for us to put our garden spot first. I may not be quoting it verbatim, but it says, prepare thy work without, make it fit for thyself in the field, and afterwards build thine house. And I really believe that when you buy a property, you need to look at that property and choose the best spot for the garden first. If you choose your house spot first, you may be building on the best spot for your garden. Now, if you watched our flood video, we believe that God directed into where we put the house and where we put the garden, because when it flooded, it's like the waters just parted and went right around the garden. On the north side where the potatoes are, we're digging them, but the water went right around the edge of the potatoes, and then just a little bit between the two. We have 2 rows over there, just a little bit between. But for the most part, the water just went around because we chose an area that was a little bit elevated so it would have good drainage and good sunlight, good light exposure, everything. And it was more out in the open so it would have good airflow and stuff. So always put the choice of your garden spot first. And those are the main things that I wanted to share for right now. And when Kaylin gets here, we'll share some more about the water situation that we had here with our hand water pump. It's quite an experience. I won't share too much about that because I want to see what Kaylin wants to share, but we installed a simple pump. We thought that we got the 5-gallon-a-minute pump, but there was a little bit of, I guess, miscommunication between us and the fellow that we bought it from, and we ended up actually with the 3-gallon-a-minute, and we were pumping our brains out. It took anywhere from, I used to say 600 to 1,000, but 600 was not sufficient. Anywhere from 800 to 1,200 pumps, depending on what size load I would wash on that simple pump to wash 1 load of laundry. And we were spending an enormous amount of time pumping water, and so thank God we finally we were able to purchase a well pump. And we don't have our solar system yet. We haven't been able to afford that yet, but in time we believe that the Lord will help us. And so we turn on the generator, fill our pressure tank with a well pump that Kaylin and a friend of ours installed a couple weeks ago, and that's been such a blessing. So we were doing a bucket flush on the toilets from the creek to keep us from having to pump so much water. So there's ways and there's things that we can do that will help the transition to country living not be such a hardship. And the purpose of this video is to maybe help you avoid some of the pitfalls that we've been through. And I'm going to end right there. I want to leave space for Kaylin to share some stuff, and maybe us together to kind of share our experience here. So
He's so cute. Hey, honey. Can you give us your 2 cents worth after I let you rest?
Sure.
okay.
Yes.
Okay. So what would you like to share with the people about your experience starting off from ground zero here on this property? As far as water and sanitation and garden, that's what I've been talking about. So what would you like to share as I'm picking off my seeds for next year?
Yeah. Well, I guess, number one, I'm thankful that you already had a lot of experience in this, because I had never had experience in off-grid living. I grew up in a city, so I've always had the conveniences and not had to deal with not having them. So it was an adjustment, but not a big adjustment. If you believe something to be true, which I believe the call to go to the country is what God has called His people to do. And so if you believe it to be true, you believe that God will provide for your needs. And so that's what I did. I trusted that He would help me. And it wasn't so much as a conscious thing every day, well, God's got to help me, even though I would pray for it. It was just the fact that I believed it, and I just accepted it, and I just moved forward. I would say the most challenging thing and the most important thing for off-grid living is to establish water. That was, well, we still don't have electricity. In a small way we do. We have a small solar system. We can do lights, and we run a generator for our other things, but we don't have a solar system set up yet, which would be nice. But water, I would say, was our biggest chore. We not only had to pump it, because we do have a well, but we would pump it out of the well into the house, and it would take anywhere each day from 600 to 1,500 pumps, and probably even more than that if we did laundry. And so that was added to our day of doing that, but that was not including flushing the toilets, and so we'd have to run to the creek with buckets and fill them up and haul them into the house also. And if we wanted hot water, we'd have to heat it on the stove. So water was a labor-intensive item for us.
That's the most vital thing.
Yeah, and water's, I believe, your most essential item that you would need. But anyway, we were fortunate enough that the Lord has blessed us with enough means. We finally have gotten the electric well pump that we run off of our generator, and that is so nice.
Oh, that's been such a blessing.
Oh, just go.
You were able to install the pitless adapter for our simple pump, and he had never done that before. And he also installed the well pump. A friend came over and helped. And these are things that Kaylin had never done before, and God has enabled you to do these things. And it's been such a blessing to have you in all that God has given you the wisdom to do. And so I would just like to say, for all the men, and we talk to a lot of men that say, I don't know how to do anything. I don't have these skills. So what? You have a God in heaven that will teach you how to do those things, and there's other brothers and sisters that will help you.
Yeah, and we did have help, and I really appreciate all the help that we have had, and those that understood things better than me helped me with the things that were really challenging for me. Most of it I would watch videos and do a little research and ask the Lord to bless, and we were able to accomplish what we have with our home. But I want people to know that country living you need to be prepared for.
That's right.
You certainly need to believe it, because if you believe it, you'll be enabled to go forward doing it and to face the adversity and the challenges, because there are challenges. It's a way different lifestyle. It requires more effort on your part, but through all of it, I've learned patience. I've learned to attempt things, because you're not going to accomplish things if you don't attempt them.
Amen.
And so I just would like people who are planning to do this to prepare for it, physically, mentally, spiritually, and financially. Do not just run into this and don't think that this is going to be an easy way of life, and because it's not an easier life, but I think it's a more joyous life because you feel more fulfilled with accomplishing things, knowing that with the hands that God give you, that you can do these things, that you have that ability. God can give you that. That's incredible, to do all these things that you'd never done before. And so the off-grid living for me is still not over. We need to get our solar system, and we're hoping to accomplish that, but there are things that will try you and challenge you, but the purpose of country living is not to hide.
It's character development.
It's character development. It's renewing the things that man was able to do. We've been so accustomed to having everything at a flip of a switch, and
Cityfied.
cityfied.
You have some serious calluses on these hands now too.
Oh yeah, I've got calluses and blisters. But anyway, I'm thankful to be out here. When I look at this place and how far we've come, it just amazes me in the short time what God has been able to do for us. And it's really turned out far beyond my expectations. And so the rewards are there. God reveals these blessings to you and rewards you with something so special when you are willing to follow His counsel. So don't be afraid to do it, but be prepared, and don't think that I'm going to come out here and just sit around and read my Bible all day long, which if you can, if your home is set up and you buy one with all of these off-grid things such as water and electricity, and you have them, that's a blessing and good for you. I'm not saying don't do that, because the more time you do have, spend it with the Lord and help others. But there is also valuable lessons in learning to do them yourself, so you have those skills and abilities that if when we can't buy or sell, you'll be able to fix them yourself because you've taken the time to understand it and to do it yourself. But if you've not done that, well, I guess I don't want to judge everybody, but God blesses others to help others too, so you can always find help.
And that's what we want to do, is help people. We're hoping to have a country living camp meeting this fall. If that's something that's interesting to you, then let us know. And if there's something that we've experienced here that we didn't cover in this video, just let us know in the comments or send me a message and let me know, and we'll try to cover that. Cooking was an issue because until we got the propane, we had the wood cook stove, but it was starting to get pretty warm, and I was trying to cook. I would have to fire up the wood stove, and it was going to be 80 degrees that day outside. That was a little bit of a challenge, so you have to think of other ways to cook. We started out with a rocket stove, which was nice. It did help, but it's a little bit, I don't know what's the word, you kind of have to babysit it, so you can't really multitask if you cook on a rocket stove. You have to stay right there with it, but it does an excellent job. So we were grateful we were able to get propane, so we use propane cook stove in the summertime and the wood cook stove in the wintertime. We also have a little gas, what do you call that thing? The outdoor thing that you have over there.
Oh, just a couple. It's just a couple of propane burners.
Yeah, I've canned outside on the propane burners behind us here. You probably are familiar with those, and so that helps not to heat up the house. And that's another thing. The Lord blessed us with the design of our house. Our walls are like 9 inches thick, and so you told them what you do to kind of help keep it cool in there, because we don't have air conditioning, and it works fairly well.
Yeah, I just open the windows in the evening and allow the airflow to come through the house, and we have a fan that we run when we start the generator to cool a refrigerator, and it blows the air in, and then in the morning I'll close the windows down, and with the 9-inch walls it keeps it relatively cool. We don't get much on the hottest day over 80, 81 so far is the warmest it's got.
And
But
if we had a shade tree on this west end of the house, it would help that a lot, which we plan to do, but we don't have it yet, so.
yeah, and that would help a lot. So, I mean, think of those things too. If you have to build a home, to have the shade in the heat of the summer to help keep the house cool. But one other thing I want to mention too is Dana, I think this is her cilantro seeds, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, is to understand gardening. That is a number 2 important item, because it will really cut down on your costs of your grocery bills, and you'll be less dependent upon running to the store for things. And so I've been learning a lot about gardening.
Me
I
too.
have not much experience in that too, and that's been a blessing, seeing the rewards of that already, just the potatoes and onions, and I get tickled when I go out there and see the,
He's fun to watch. He's like
Yeah.
a kid in a candy store.
but all of it, all in all, I believe it's been good for Dana and I. It's helped us together too.
We've
Because
grown much closer.
you need each other's support when you're doing it yourself. You need each other, you really do, and I think that's been a really good blessing for us also.
Amen.
So,
Okay. Thank you for sharing.
yeah,
Appreciate it. We'll see you guys on the next video.
God bless. Don't put that on there.
I am too.